I guess we already did a very brief sound check, but just whilst we're now live, if someone could just let me know my voice is coming through loud and clear.
Sounds great.
Fantastic. All right, well, as we mentioned, we do have quite a lot to cover today, so if there are any questions, please pop them into the chat box and we'll make sure that we address them. The likelihood is, however, we will turn to questions at the end of the presentation. We typically find that the majority of them are asked as we take you on this journey, or answered, I should say, as we take you through the journey. So we will have a question and answer session at the end, so don't fret about that. My name is David Macfarlane. I'm the Commercial Director here at Teachaway. I've been with the organisation now for around 6 years, and obviously a lot has changed in the landscape of recruitment and on the demands of international teachers in that time. Teachaway as an organisation, if you haven't heard of us before, we have a singular mission, and that is to solve the teacher shortage. Very bold and perhaps moonshot, we know. However, we do see it really as an economic problem. So from the supply side, we need more teachers in the global economy to support the growth in international education. And in order to address that, we try to find as many teachers as we possibly can and bring them to our platform so that they can apply for jobs in your schools and the many other international schools around the world. The other things that we're engaged in is not only the initial recruitment of teachers, but then also the subsequent training and professional development that they require in order to excel in their field. Now, today's chat is specifically on recruitment. We're going to look at the challenges that international schools face, the intrinsic turnover, and how we can minimize that and attract new teachers to your schools. So before we dive in, I'm just going to throw things over to Ash so he can introduce himself and let you know his background.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, David, and thank you, Derek. I guess not good morning to all, but insert your own relevant time of day greeting to everyone around the world. As David mentioned, we're going to get through a fair bit of material really focusing on our international recruitment report that we've conducted here at Teachaway. But just to introduce myself, I'm the operations director here at Teachaway. I've been with the organization since we were a wee bunch of 5 people 10 years ago. And now I'm happy to say that we're now very much global with offices in Vancouver, Toronto, Edinburgh, Albania, and in Shanghai as well. And so I've been working within the organization on both the recruitment side and the digital learning side as well. And excited to chat with you all today. So let's get to it. Today we're going to be talking about specifically recruitment. And what we want to talk about is how hiring methods have changed, the increased demand for English medium educators, and the shortage of teachers that David mentioned we're working on solving. We expect to finish it, by the way, next Thursday afternoon, about 2 o'clock. We should hit our goal. Just kidding, still ambitious goal. And we'll be talking about teacher job search methods that have been evolving with the technology, and that we've been very proud to be at the forefront of that evolution since we started as an organization. So the main thing today, we'll be talking about really what matters most to candidates who are looking to teach abroad. And I know that might be up there with your top 3 questions within recruitment. It's certainly near the top. And wondering what matters most to candidates really helps you get at the heart of the motivations and how you align then your recruitment strategy to engaging with candidates in the best way possible. And so as experts in the education recruitment field, we've been hearing this question a lot at Teachaway. And frankly, until now, the most honest answer we had when saying what matters most to candidates has been, well, it depends. It depends on the candidate. And credible data-driven answers just hadn't been available. There was a lot of anecdotal evidence, a lot of I heard this, and some teachers told me that, but nothing that was really data-based that could help us drive our decisions in a really focused, data-driven way, which is what we're all trying to do as leaders of our organizations and our schools. And so to help better understand this and how schools can leverage candidate preferences and perceptions, we said, well, let's ask the teachers. We have a massive database of teachers of over 850,000 teachers around the world. And so we decided to do a survey of a small portion of that. So we surveyed over 10,000 education professionals to find out really what drives candidates to teach abroad. and what are their key motivations and frustrations when they're looking for employment? And lastly, where do they go to research and search for new jobs? Where are they looking? All of these questions we figured are very pertinent to schools internationally. So let's have a look at who we surveyed. And we really did make it a global approach, and it was just over 10,000 respondents that we had to the survey. Primarily, the bulk were from North America, from the United States and Canada, and you'll notice that a lot of these percentages tend to mirror the weighting of population size for these key countries. But 43% were from North America, we had 5% from the UK and Ireland, 10% from South Africa, a small percentage, about 3% in Australia, New Zealand, Australasia, and then 39% essentially scattered around the world, which is probably the teachers in your schools right now. And so in terms of breaking it down, the teachers and who was represented within this sample, we broke it down in not only by nations, but also by their curricular experience. And so about a full third of them had experience with US Common Core, about 20% with UK national curriculum, about 10% with Advanced Placement College Board, and then with 10% also for International Baccalaureate. And then we had a bit of a smattering within Montessori. And beyond that, we know that almost, just over 2/3, or around 2/3, we were looking at similar kind of percentages of where they were coming from, so their own local and state curriculum in primarily the English-speaking countries where we really focus and where a lot of the people in our databases. So we reached out to a bunch of people. What does their experience look like? So we have a sense of where they were and what kind of curricula they were familiar with. And then in terms of the years of experience, what you'll notice here is fully more than half are 5 years or more experience, but 22%, 2 to 4%, 15% are the newer teacher to the field, and then 6% were aspiring teachers who are trying to get into your schools. And so the reason why we wanted to showcase this is to really identify that the international recruitment report that we conducted was pretty comprehensive, really, in terms of geographic location, curricular experience, and years of teaching. This is certainly not just a bunch of millennials who decide to click through on a Facebook or a BuzzFeed survey. This was really a broad-based sampling of people with real experience, with real curriculum. Now, from there, we want to talk about the shortage. And I know that my colleague David is going to talk a little bit more about you, but finding enough skilled teachers is going to be the biggest challenge facing international schools. And you've heard this drum being beaten every conference that you're at. I know everyone's going to tell you, just ask the folks over at ISC. They can't have a sip of coffee without letting you know that we're in for trouble. But they're not wrong. And the reason being is twofold, really. There is a systemic shortage of university graduates going into teacher training institutions. And there's also on the demand side, there's a massive increase in the number of international schools expanding around the world. Most notably in places like the Middle East, in the GCC, and in China as well, where there's so many of these international programs starting in public schools there. They're looking for the same teachers you are. And so I think this kind of passing idea of, well, there's international schools and then there's the international program schools. Well, the established international schools, even if you're the American School of Rome, traditionally have never really had much trouble recruiting teacher because, hey, everyone wants to go to Rome. Everyone is competing for the same teachers. So even though we may see them as a segment or a segmented market, a new graduate or a teacher who's first looking at international teaching doesn't see that segmentation in the same way. And so with that, I'm going to, there's the shortfall that Richard Gaskell will always tell you about that's coming, and we're looking at a need for 150,000 qualified teachers over the next 4 years. Really outstanding numbers, and by 2021 they're looking at a need of 581,000 teachers. If you ask the United Nations, they're talking about in the millions over the next 20 years. Regardless, whomever's numbers are right, no one is saying we're okay. And I think you would all echo that sentiment as well. So what do we do about it? And with that, I'll pass it over to David.
Well, thanks, Ash. We talked briefly about the motivations of candidates earlier, and I'm sure you're eager to learn exactly what it is candidates are looking for and what they care about. So over the next few slides, we're going to dive in and see what insights we can take from that data. We'll start with a look at candidates' motivations for teaching abroad and what they're looking for when they're choosing which schools or jobs specifically to apply to. So as you can see from the slide presented in front of you, the first key takeaway is, and probably not surprising for the majority, travel is a key motivator for candidates. I think the real interesting one for me was the 5% of people who are saying that they're not looking to go overseas due to a lack of job opportunities at home. They're not pursuing teaching abroad out of economic necessity, financial motivations, and a lack of opportunities, as you can see, trail behind in third and fourth place respectively. Today's international candidates are really embracing the prospect of broadening their horizons, but they're also very, very serious about their career progression. So as international school heads, why does this matter to you, and how can you use this insight to your benefit? Well, if you aren't already doing so, it's really time to revamp your job postings and marketing materials to make sure that you're including compelling job content that showcases the benefits that make a position at your school impactful and rewarding. A key theme throughout this presentation, and I'm sure subconsciously Ash and I will say it many, many times, but is a transformational experience. And that's really what we find to be the key motivator in today's marketplace. So when you go back to your schools, or when you turn back your attention to your colleagues after the webinar, a question to ask yourselves is, are we as schools positioning ourselves effectively given the motivations of the educators that we're looking to hire? Now, as we move on to the next slide, we're going to take a wee look at the reservations, or indeed the lack of reservations that candidates have for working overseas. I think maybe the perception is that people have a fear of moving overseas, and what we found is that simply is not the case. With the world becoming more local and more knowledge and content being available for candidates, we found that knowledge is power, and this is alleviating many of the doubts that maybe existed back before technology was so prevalent. Other than maybe personal safety and cultural and geographical implications, there are very few things that are giving candidates apprehension. I think one of the things that we need to think about is, with all the information that's available for candidates, this is a very, very considered move, and the candidates are educated. So the key thing is to be honest in your job descriptions and honest in your marketing materials. You don't necessarily have to oversell on the positives, because the candidates do a lot of research. So it's very important that we're not overstating things, and we are being honest in order to make sure that the way we're attracting candidates appears genuine. One of the key things we try to help schools do is make and allow candidates to see the big picture. Beyond primary motivations candidates have for wanting to teach internationally, once they've made the decision to go abroad comes a whole other level of factors that will impact on whether a candidate decides to apply to a specific and particular school or not. The truth is, candidates take a variety of factors into account when deciding which schools to apply for. And as you can see, these things include salary, location, and career progression opportunities. The interesting thing is that while compensation undoubtedly plays an important role in a candidate's decision, other benefits could ultimately have a really significant impact as well. Today's international teacher, I'll use the phrase again, they want more than just a job. They're looking for a transformational experience, and that includes things like travel, career progression, and support from a local community and a school community as well. There are some of these things, obviously, that we have the ability to impact more than others. And whilst I appreciate overall compensation package is ranked number 1 up there at 32%, unfortunately, we don't have limitless budgets. And for some schools, this is obviously going to be a key concern. I think the takeaway and the real message here is, If budget is a key concern at your school and you struggle to compete with other schools that are able to offer fantastic compensation packages, we're just really going to have to move past it. But what we can do is make sure that we're successfully telling the school's story. And by communicating what life is actually like at your school and how teachers can thrive personally and professionally within the school and the wider community, you're really going to go a long, long way to competing against the schools that can just offer a great package. Now, as we look on to the next slide, we're going to investigate what other benefits candidates are actually looking for. In today's competitive job market, job seekers look at more than just annual salary, as we just previously discussed, when they're considering whether or not to accept a role at a new school. Perks and benefits can be a game changer when it comes to recruiting top teaching talent. As just mentioned, schools that can't compete on compensation or location alone should bear in mind that other factors when positioning their school to candidates are just as important. That said, of course, you should aim to keep your salary and offers as competitive as you can within the local region. An important piece here, which we often get lots of questions about, is accommodation. Obviously, it weighs very heavily on a candidate's mind, and it really is a key thing to be considering when you're putting together your package. We've seen some schools who aren't in the luxury position of owning their own accommodation, simply offering something like an accommodation stipend. And one of the big kind of takeaways we've had from candidates is that they really want to experience a sense of belonging and comfort, especially when they first arrive into a new location. So simply, handing them a business card of the local realtor and giving them a recommended allowance for an apartment rent is not enough. It could make the candidate feel isolated. So how you can overcome this is maybe posing this as a choice to the teacher and making sure that you are supporting them if they have to source local accommodation themselves by maybe sending one of the current teachers out with them to view different apartments, and then they can obviously give local advice and really make the teacher feel comfortable with what is going to be one of the biggest decisions they'll make on any international journey. Now, as we move into the next section of the webinar, we're going to start looking at where candidates actually want to teach abroad. Now, a very important thing here is that you sell your location. As you'll see here from this slide, the leading destinations for candidates looking to teach abroad are Europe and Asia, followed by Latin America, the Middle East, and lastly, Africa. I think the most important takeaway here is, no two candidates are the same. Everybody's looking for an experience that resonates with their own personal visions and their own personal aspirations, both personally and professionally. The landscape has indeed changed significantly over the past few years, and there are a number of factors that contribute to why candidates prefer one destination over another. Location, climate, salary, and compensation are all among them, but as mentioned, all candidates have their own motivations. So we have to just make sure that we're being completely honest with our own location and ensuring that we're attracting the right talent. There are a few things that you can do that we've seen work very, very well for a number of international schools like yourselves. We do work with schools in over 60 different countries, so we have got a lot of experience when it comes to this particular topic. The first thing you can do is sell your location. We've seen countless candidates that had one location in mind, but once they were able to learn more about an alternative that they had perhaps initially not even considered, they became intrigued and ended up choosing to go somewhere that they never thought that they would do this in their wildest dreams. There are a few tactics that you can employ in order to achieve this. Firstly, writing a job posting that's more than just a list of things that you want in your ideal candidate. You have to speak to their own specific motivations. You need to get today's travel-motivated teaching candidates excited and make your school's location stand out. So what makes living and teaching in your city or town or country appealing? And we can do this obviously by highlighting local attractions, easy access to transportation, distinctive cuisines, notable cultural opportunities, and so on and so forth. The list is really endless. We've talked a lot about travel potential, so let's just dig into this a little further. On this particular topic, we also surveyed our candidates on their preferred setting for international teaching jobs. And, not surprisingly, we found that the urban setting was by far the most popular. However, that said, if you are a school that is in a rural setting or a suburban setting, there are unique benefits to living and working within your setting that you can use to your advantage when marketing the location of your school to potential hires. And again, this really comes back to the point that no two candidates are the same. So somebody who's looking for the bustling city life, they may not have considered the specific benefits that you can offer in these different surroundings. Housing options are typically more spacious in an urban setting, and the cost of living is, of course, lower, allowing for a much greater saving potential that could feed that need and that desire to travel, going back many, many slides. Additionally, teachers who are in a quieter setting don't necessarily have to contend with the disadvantages of city life. Things like traffic jams and lower air quality, higher crime rates. Have you considered, presenting those as benefits within your job advertisement or in your website to make sure that candidates are aware that this is what your school can offer? If your region offers recreational opportunities, be sure to list these in detail, and in particular, any nearby outdoor activities and famous scenic cultural sites that are likely to appeal to travel-motivated job seekers. I often kind of use my own example. You may have picked up from the accent that I'm from the UK, specifically Scotland, and when I compare Europe to maybe North America, it's just such a different landscape. And what I mean by that is, I can travel in the same time it takes for someone to travel from New York to San Francisco. In fact, in less time, I could get to Spain, France, Italy. So really harboring that need for travel and the transformational experience that I can go and see lots of different countries and experience lots of different cultures that are really on my doorstep. So I think at this point, I'm going to hand things back over to Ash as we look at what makes teachers want to stay at your school.
Thanks, David. So you found your teacher. You attracted them. You pitched them at a fair or on the phone or over Skype. And so what's next with this? And the reality is if you've just spent a lot of time to do that, a lot of effort, and you've plenty of other things to do when you're running a school. You've also probably spent a fair chunk of money to convince a teacher to choose your school, and there's plenty of alternatives out there, and all of your colleagues and all their lovely schools as well. And so now you want to do everything you can to hold on to that teacher. And so that brings us up to our next kind of topic, which is what can you do that's going to make a teacher want to stay at your school rather than play what's been all too common in the, I guess, and we even call it this, we call it a circuit, the international school circuit. How do we get them to stay at your school rather than just bounce around? And so it's this kind of understanding that there is a circuit is what makes employee engagement pretty challenging. But there are some ways that we can work to stem this cyclic movement of our teachers. And so let's dig in on that a little bit. The biggest thing is going to be onboarding. You found the teacher, you've spent all the time to source them, but good onboarding, we know from our research, and we also know from our practical experience here at Teachaway, and I outlined this anecdote in the current edition of Intered in my article there, about our work with the government program in the GCC, in the United Arab Emirates specifically. And we've placed over 6,000 teachers there over the past 7 years. And so this is a massive program which we set up and we established. And when we first started with them, there was the sourcing of the candidates, the interviewing, the documents, all assessment and processing and authentication, all that good stuff that runs the administrative process. the key focus, because it was such an urgent drive, the focus was doing the administrative things to get the people in the classroom. And what happened that first year is we realized that there was quite a significant dropout rate. Arriving at the schools, getting set up, starting a new life, there wasn't enough attention put to the human aspect of the process. And so this onboarding process, we know, is a critical piece, because immediately after that, once we saw that there was a problem with the retention, we cycled back and said, okay, we figured out the administrative process for a mass hiring initiative. How do we make this more human, frankly? And we were very successful in doing that. We did some things like engaging the teachers with the teachers who are already in the schools, conducting webinars like these, theme-based webinars on different topics that would be of interest to them, for teachers who had families, what kind of family activities, and really enhancing the kind of human component of it to let them know that they weren't alone in this process, that they were about to go through the administrative ringer. There was no doubt about that, but we were there to hold their hands through the process and let them know what to expect in bite-sized chunks. And so we know that this kind of comprehensive onboarding strategy, this kind of experience really reduces the likelihood of attrition within the first few months, compared with schools with a weaker or frankly non-existing onboarding process. And we've seen all types and we've worked with all types. The thing is you can't just hire a great teacher and cross your fingers. You really do need to have a solid plan to make your new hire feel welcome. And I've met schools that have recruitment plans that dovetail nicely with their onboarding plans, and both of which are aligned to their actual vision of their school. But I've also met a lot of school heads who haven't been able to take the time, not necessarily because they haven't wanted to do it. I know, again, how busy you really are. But it is a critical piece because it's a costly piece. And if you don't have the right teacher in the classroom, the students suffer on that, and you don't achieve the learning outcomes that you're really striving to achieve. So onboarding really starts the moment that you decide to hire. So waiting until day one to start this process is too late. Before your new teacher even sets foot in the school, you have to have the right orientation process in place. And the important thing is to keep the candidate interested, to really raise that excitement level as the start date approaches. Because one of the things that we've seen work really well also is that providing training on the culturally responsive teaching. So teaching within this new culture that they're going to be engaging with can really set themselves up for success. And so it's not just new hires that international schools need to worry about as well on this recruitment piece and the retention and onboarding piece. It's also keeping the teachers that you have. We know that it's 3 times more expensive to hire a new teacher than retaining an existing teacher. That's a major cost to your school. And so when we reached out through our international recruitment report, we wanted to know what are the kinds of things that make candidates really want to stay at a school. And it's not really surprising to us. And actually at the recent AAIE conference, I did a presentation with Dr. Ann Jurwitz at Cayman International Schools. And when we put our data together and hers together, we did some further research. One of the things that we saw that our research, both sets of data, really dovetailed as well with Boston Consulting Group and their efforts to poll essentially the workforce of the world. See what really leads to your happiness on the job. And very much at the top of it were those transformational components. And one of those key things is professional development opportunities. Am I going to grow at your school, or is this a holiday? Am I going to be a better teacher? Are you going to help lead me as a school leader? Are you going to help lead me and coach me so that I can transform into the better teacher that I aspire to be? That's a critical piece for them. And that doesn't cost a lot of money. That takes your time. Second to that is the support. Support me as I do this. I'm making a life-changing experience. We've all worked and taught internationally, but we tend to forget how much of a challenge that was the very first time. They might be doing it for their first time. I know a lot of you are looking for these teachers who already have 2 years experience. That's a nice thing to insist on, but with the skyrocketing growth in demand and the minimal supply, we know that that's going to have to shift. And we're going to have to look at some of the newer teachers. Third to that is having the up-to-date technology that they need. Give me the tools to do the job, and I'll be able to make magic in the classroom is what we're hearing from teachers. And again, the potential to progress in the role, so that kind of professional development or transformational component. And then, of course, the easy ones of classroom autonomy. Just let me do my job. I know what I'm doing now. Step back. I'll make it happen. And then having the proper workplace amenities. Now, from there, we want to know, okay, great. This is how we keep our current teachers. This is how we onboard those teachers. But where were they looking? So let's have a quick look at this. So we know that job searching methods have evolved. We've watched it, frankly, because when we first started on the scene 10 years ago, we set the standard for digital recruitment for international schools. We've watched as different groups have kind of scrambled to keep up. And they've seen that shift as well. They saw it coming, but fortunately we came of age within this age. We didn't have to make a shift. This is what we've always done. We've always led the kind of innovative edge of recruitment. And so we know that there has been a shift for a lot of schools to recognize that and shift their priorities and their strategies when they're recruitment. We still hear it every now and then. We still hear the phrase recruitment season, but we know that's a dead idea. Today is the recruitment season. And in 2 months from now, that will be the recruitment season. Because every day your school is open is the recruitment season. And we know that change has happened over the past few years. And so this kind of digital transformation is something that we know, and our candidates tell us there that, hey, look, 97% of these teachers are looking online for their jobs. From there, we know that the school, your website is also a critical piece. Personal referrals, that's a fantastic method. But really, the key takeaway of that slide is that if you're not online, and if you're not online effectively, and we'll talk more about what that means, you might not be doing it right. So rethinking these kind of traditional recruitment strategies for more modern techniques is really important to engage with today's candidate. And so this kind of digitally connected world that we're in, recruiting teachers means exactly that, recruiting online. So when we change this outlook from kind of how can we find the best teachers to how can we help the best teachers find us, now more than ever, it's really important. It's critically important to optimize your vacancies to be found online, whether you choose to advertise your own school website or on an external job board. So if you're advertising your jobs online, and you should be, and I think at this stage, if you're not, then you probably wouldn't be on a webinar. You likely are. And you want to start teaching, you want teaching candidates to find you, you'll need to do a couple of things to make sure that you're posting jobs on specialized job boards. So of the respondents who indicated that they prefer to search for jobs online, we asked them then to kind of rank their favorite channels. And so 52% of those respondents said that they wanted industry-specific job boards. And so an industry-specific job board, for example, if you're shopping for shoes, you can go to a shopping mall, but if you really just want shoes, you're probably going to go to the shoe store. And so that's the kind of analogy we talk about here. There are plenty of places that you can post your jobs all over online, plenty of job boards, but you really want to have a laser focus when you do this and get those on a job board. And obviously, hey, like Teachaway, but I might be biased. We know that teachers prefer to turn to job boards that cater to the education industry because all of the positions there are targeted to those candidates. So when you are posting those vacancies, really start out with the specialized job boards. That's the key takeaway here because they're going to give you the most relevant and qualified candidates. And they're going to be the ones that provide the greatest return on your recruitment spend. So let's help candidates discover you. What we do know is that 65% of the job seekers arriving at Teachaway via Google using location-based search terms, okay? And attracting the always looking and these always connected candidates, international schools should invest their hiring budget in channels where these job seekers are likely to search. So getting your jobs on career websites that offer resources and content for job seekers related to teaching and living in your region. That's the takeaway here. And to be sure that the career site you choose to advertise on also ranks highly for key search terms related to your geographical region. So if you do a search now, say if your school is in, I don't know, Ecuador, just Google teach in Ecuador and see where you land and see what's showing up, because that's what teachers are going to be looking for when they're thinking, hey, I want to teach in Ecuador. What's ranking highly there? Where are you going to get those candidates? Another critical piece is, I'm not sure if you've opened your school's website recently on your phone, but give it a try. Let me know how it looks. Because we know that over 50% of job seekers are navigating to the Teachaway job board from their smartphones. And we've just seen the great shift, as noted by Google, just over the past couple of months, that now more than half of internet traffic happens on mobiles. So if
Sorry, Ash, I can just jump in there and add something, actually. So this slide, obviously, 50% of job seekers navigate to the Teachaway job board from their smartphones. I just last weekend had the pleasure of attending a presentation by Finalsite, who, as I'm sure you know, creates education-specific websites. But their data also shows that of their international schools, in the sense that of the websites that they run for international schools, over 50% of the traffic going to the schools' websites was also through a mobile device. So not only the Teachaway job board generally across the internet, but specifically schools' website as well, over 50% mobile.
No kidding. That's outrageous. And then I noticed that myself when I'm doing my own, because I do most of my Google searches on my phone now rather than my laptop. It's now become a pet peeve of mine. If a website isn't optimized for my mobile device, it's infuriating. And if it's infuriating to me, I know it is to many other teachers who are there. So, and it's another critical piece when you're really putting your best face forward to the world via your website, make sure that it is mobile optimized. And anyways, with that, I'm gonna pop it over back to you, DMAC, or David Macfarlane, DMAC to his friends, and on to you.
Thanks, Ash. So finally, let's take a look at how far in advance candidates are searching for jobs. When you need to be advertising your vacancies to ensure you have a chance to hire the best international teaching talent, and what you can do as an employer to put your best foot forward and make a great first impression on potential new hires. So I think this is a really telling slide. Obviously, kind of as we've spoken about earlier on in the presentation, more schools means more job opportunities. And with less teachers coming through the system, it very much means that it's a candidate's market. What we found is that teachers will make, on average, at least 5 applications to different schools during a search. So what that tells us that it's really, really important for schools to make a first impression and ensure that you are differentiating yourselves from your, dare I say it, competitors. And you can do that by making sure that you're reaching back out to candidates immediately, providing them with relevant information on the hiring process, on the school, on the location, maybe even taking things a step further and connecting them to a teacher locally who's currently working at the school. One of the other things that we're seeing companies, such as Finalsite doing is they're leveraging technology in order to assist and help schools give candidates more information and a better insight into what life would be like at the school, using things like AI in order to give a 3D tour of the buildings and the facilities within the school. All of these things really allow a teacher to envision themselves at your institution and really picture what life would be like at your school. Other key things are, making sure, Ash touched on this a little bit earlier, but making sure that you have a hiring strategy. Really, really important that you know exactly what you're doing when you're posting jobs, when you're marketing the school. So talking things like websites, job posting, what happens when applications come in? Is it a mad scramble to ad hocly reach out to the people who have applied? Or is there a specific strategy and process in place so you know that every candidate is getting the same information, is being contacted within a specific time frame, and really just making sure that you know. In fact, a really good question to ask yourself is, what is your acquisition cost for a teacher? Do you know exactly how much it costs to hire a teacher? And are you making sure that you're designating budget to the most important aspects of hiring to make sure that you're giving yourselves success in actually converting that applicant from application to a teacher in the classroom? As we move on to the next slide, the dreaded statement, be ready to hire year round. There's still a lot of conversation and a lot of chat at conferences about quote unquote, the hiring season. Unfortunately, all of the research and all of the data that we've gone through would indicate that hiring season is no longer. You really need to have a year-round strategy in order to set yourself up for success. As we mentioned, speed is key. Now, when I say that, speed is key to contact a candidate and to initiate the process, not necessarily to make a decision on whether or not you're going to hire the candidate. The important thing is you have to keep candidates engaged. As just mentioned on the last slide, a lack of strategy, process, or clarity will result in a disengaged talent pool and the potential loss of a teacher. Our data shows that schools that reached out to a candidate within 3 days of the initial application had a far greater success rate for hiring that specific teacher. Candidates are 27% more likely to accept an offer from you if you reach out within that critical 3-day window, and 22% less likely to drop out of the hiring process altogether. How can you leverage technology in order to make sure that you are managing the recruitment process as best as we possibly can? And having things like an applicant tracking system will really give you the opportunity to ensure that candidates are being managed through the hiring process, and will also allow you to build and develop your own talent pool. As we can see here, going back to the hiring season, it's taking candidates, they're looking for jobs over 6 months prior to making a move. And 41% of them claim to be searching for over 6 months before making a hiring decision. What that really tells us is that teachers are looking for roles year round, and they are always engaged in the search and what their next opportunity might be. If you're not represented year round, and if you don't have a brand presence online year round, then you really aren't setting yourselves up for success, and will find yourselves in a mad scramble to fill vacancies when other schools have already completed. When you do require your teacher, when do you require to give your teachers notifications? When I first started in the job, it was very typical that teachers would have to give their letters of intent in January or even February. And now we're seeing schools push that date back and back and back. And typically now we'll find it in November or December. So if that is the case, imagine what teachers are doing in August and September and October. They're starting to consider what options are available to them so that they can accurately tell you whether or not they're going to extend their contract and stay another year. It would be much easier, we know, if we could all recruit in a specific month. 1st of February comes around and go, it's recruitment season, and at the end of March, pencils down, that's it. If you've not hired your vacancies, that's unfortunate for you. But I'm afraid that simply isn't the case, and a year-round talent strategy is absolutely key. And with that, I'm going to kick it back across to Ash, and we're just going to sum things up with 5 key takeaways.
Great, thanks, David. So everyone, when it comes to hiring new teachers from overseas, there is one thing that is critically clear to us, that international schools no longer really have the, I guess you could say, the upper hand when it comes to recruitment. Because today's hiring environment is very competitive, fiercely competitive even. And top international teaching candidates can expect to receive multiple offers from over the course of their job search. And so to continue to attract and engage and recruit the best teachers, schools like yours are just going to have to move a little faster and be more transparent than ever before. Because each Teach Abroad candidate, regardless of their specialization or even their experience level, has their own motivations and their own factors when considering a new job opportunity. So uncovering the common components behind their decision-making process can really help you tailor your recruitment strategy to be more effective. And that strategy is key. And having it laid out, planned out, and not just aligned with, well, I expect to fly here and there, so let's do it all then. But really, when you create your strategy, what are you trying to achieve? How are you going to measure success? And how are you going to know that you're on track to achieve those goals? And who's involved with you in creating and achieving those goals? Very often over the past couple of years, it just seems that school heads will take this on as this is mine and only I can engage in this process. And there isn't an organization in the world that thinks like that. And I know that has been very much tradition, and I know it's your school that you're accountable for. And so there's no doubt that the final decision should come from the head of school. It is a massive amount of responsibility to bring someone into their learning community. But those initial steps of engaging with the candidates, of following through, of helping building out the onboarding process, it shouldn't all rest on your shoulders. And so don't do it to yourself, because that's a critical opportunity to be able to engage with your staff to give them opportunities to grow professionally, which just so happens that we saw is a very important piece for candidates in terms of maintaining them and retaining them. So it wouldn't be any presentation these days without 5 key takeaways. So exactly what are they? I'll try and keep them snappy. Travel is big. Don't forget that you're living in a foreign country, or most of you are. And while that may have been normalized to you, it's not normalized to everyone else. This is exciting. So be excited about it and really showcase where you are. We know that most candidates are looking for jobs online. And when I say most, what was the percent? 98%? They all are. Everyone is looking online. So what does your face to the world look like? And where are you looking for your teachers? We also know that money matters. Of course it does. And money matters to everyone. But not as much as you think. The transformational component, career growth, these are the critical pieces to teachers in terms of making them happy. This is how they judge success in terms of growth. Am I becoming a better teacher? I just hope I'm getting paid reasonably well in the process. But hey, your branding, your face to the world must be a top priority. How are you engaging with them? And not just with your website. Do you have a solid integrated kind of brand strategy? From the very first engagement, what do your emails look like? Are they branded? What do your letters look like? When you engage with your candidates perhaps interviewing over Skype, how are you presenting that? Are you standardizing the format? Do you have a continuous kind of branding that really unites your school's vision with your recruitment strategy? Because the candidates can feel that. And lastly, there is no recruitment season. Every day is the recruitment season. And so recruiting should be a year-round effort. Creating that pool, drawing the interest, even in early stages, maintaining your candidates, maintaining your staff, and getting them to spread the word. This is what the recruitment season is. It is a year-round, day-to-day effort. So I hope you were able to learn something, and keep in mind that all of this information that we brought through here today during this presentation is directly from our International Recruitment Report, which we are now working on the next version of, which we will launch in the fall. And we always encourage feedback from our school heads. So those of you on the line who may have some specific questions that you've been really wondering, what are people thinking about this? We can certainly consider that and possibly build it into our presentation or our next recruitment report and poll over 10,000 people to really get the feedback that you're looking for. So you want the data? We've got it. And we look forward to making the next report even better. If you want a copy of the full report, please reach out to David and myself. We can direct you to the link to download that, share with your staff, to really get a better sense of what's happening in the worlds of teachers' minds. But with that, we'll turn it over to all of you, and we'd be happy to take any questions that you might have.
Thank you, David and Ash, and also Doug. This is Derek again. At the moment, we don't have any questions in the chat, but if anybody would like to ask a question in the chat, please do. Also, take an opportunity in the chat. I put a link to AAIE's InterEd, our professional journal, which Ash mentioned, his article about onboarding and teacher happiness, keeping teachers involved at your school is available. It came out maybe a week or so ago as just a publication that we have of different articles, of which Ash wrote one for recruitment. And the other thing is that while you're here, if you do have a question, please ask it in the chat. And if you have a question later, I will follow up with an email that has the link to the recording of this webinar. But you can, and I will also be able to give you Ash's and David's email in that email. You can see it on your screen now, but in case you want to follow up afterwards, I can provide that for you when we send out the link for the video. Okay, at the moment, I see no questions, so I think at this point, Ash, David, we can go ahead and close out. I have a feeling you'll get some follow-up questions because I know my mind is also kind of a lot of information. So it's very, you know, I'll watch it again. I think other people will probably do the same. And just the idea of really how do you message when you're trying to go through that recruitment is such a big deal. So I think a lot of people that'll be a lot to think about for the next week or two.
Fantastic. Thanks, Derek. Appreciate you organizing. Thank you, everyone. And if you have any questions about the process, or really if you want to have some insight into what your current recruitment strategy and process is now, I can help walk you through an audit, and I'd be happy to chat with you.
Great.
Yep. And just personally, Derek, thank you very much for the opportunity, and we look forward to fielding any questions that do come after the fact.
Great. Thank you, David. All right. Take care. Everybody have a good day.
Thanks, guys.